All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual presentation of Hawthorn College. I'm David Clitheroe, and I'm happy to serve this morning as your Master of Ceremonies. Uh, for those of you who haven't participated with us before, we started Hawthorn College a few years ago as a value-added educational service for our business and community leaders. We've had a lot of great responses to that over the years, and I think today's presentation will carry on in that tradition. Now, I'm sure many of you have participated in Zoom meetings and webinars over these past several weeks, but here's just a few helpful reminders or rules of the road as we go forward today. First, Anna is going to mute all the participants so we don't have any background noise while Caleb is making his presentation. However, if there's something that comes up that Caleb mentions and you want to ask a question, go ahead and shoot that into the chat box. And if it's a good opportunity, we'll ask Caleb that question. However, at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. And if you'd like to offer your question verbally, we'll open up your microphone so you can do that as well. All the presentation materials today we will share with you, either the recorded version, which we will have on the Hawthorn Bank website under our Business Resource Center, as well as a few items that Caleb will provide as part of his presentation. And before we get started, I want to offer just a word of thanks to our partners in this effort, Vantage Consultants. Anna Lawrence and Kelly Smith have helped with the marketing of this program. And if you heard earlier on as we were chatting, it's really Anna and Kelly that are working behind the scenes to make this go. So I really do appreciate their efforts. And again, this is virtual. We're not really experienced with this yet, so we ask a little grace as we work through this. If there are some challenges, we'll try to accommodate those as we move along. Now, let me introduce our presenter. Caleb Brown is one of the partners of JS Computech, and I consider JS Computech, and many people throughout Central Missouri would consider them as one of the premier IT service providers in Central Missouri. Caleb's presentation I've had the opportunity to watch a couple of times, and I believe you will be very impressed, and it's certainly great information to have. Also on the call with Caleb today are his partners, Bruce Summers and Tim Narr. So Caleb, let me turn over the microphone, the video to you.
Awesome, thanks. And thanks for the opportunity here. One of our missions here is to bring IT sanity to our clients and our staff and the community in general, the business community here. So I'm going to move really fast through a lot of these slides. As David mentioned, we'll provide, if anybody wants the slide deck, I'll be happy to send it to them. And feel free at any time a question strikes you, pop it in the Q&A or pop it in the chat. My lovely Vanna White assistant, Tim Narr, is looking for those. So some of them he might even answer just straight away because he's seen this presentation a whole bunch of times, probably knows it better than I do. And so you can get your question answered right away, or we can answer it live when we get to that spot. So we're going to cover these critical things that you want to do to protect yourself personally and your business today. So what are some of the reasons we're here? Well, we get situations like this pretty often. How do we process our insurance renewal we just got? It's got all these questions on it about all these things, and we're not sure if we're doing these things or not. Can you give us a hand? Sometimes they're a frustrating spot of, hey, our bank just contacted us and we wired money to the wrong spot. Somebody stole our credentials and actually was able to use an email scam to get a transaction someplace we couldn't go. So an example of this is actually a estimated 400 million. This is a story from quite some time ago, but 400 million in lost transactions from real estate transactions and title things that are happening out here. So there's a couple that still hasn't seen any of the the funds from their sale of their home because they were caught up in one of these scams. So what we're really going to try to cover today is what are the threats, what do they look like, so you can identify them so that you can, avoid them. How the world we are living in and the connectivity has increased our ability to connect with people, but also increased some of your risk and your liability. And we'll go through those areas and focus on what are some of the things you can actually do. And I'll preface this with, as much as I love business and I love making money, a ton of these things are going to be things that you can just do that don't cost you anything. They don't cost you extra. There's not, unfortunately, there's not an easy button that you can buy to solve these problems. A lot of it is what you have to do and how you have to behave. And we'll talk about some next steps and some questions that you might want to ask your teams in your leadership meetings to make sure that you and your business are all on the same page with what your risk is here. So the first and probably most critical piece of this is to understand that this is a huge, huge business. In fact, a lot of it is run by business and nation states. This isn't the Hollywood version of what's been portrayed as what a hacker looks like and does. They're not a disgruntled person sitting in their basement trying to hack the world because they're, they didn't get the prom date that they wanted. It is big business. You'll recognize some of the faces on here. You understand some of the numbers here are pretty massive. So, some of these attacks, like a Romanian gang, that $1.2 billion happened in the course of about a year and a half. So anybody can raise your hand if you'd like to be part of a business that can make $1.2 billion in 15 months. Pretty impressive. So some pretty huge sophistication here that's happening. And again, the most important thing to understand is that these folks are running this as a business. They're running it day and night. They're running it with sophisticated tools and easy to use tools, just like you run your business. The only advantage they have over you is they don't have any ethics. They don't care if they're hurting people. And a lot of these things are going to fund really bad and really terrible other things. So I would argue, just as a point of notice here, if you take nothing else from this presentation, just understand fantastic, do them to help you keep the wealth you have and generate more. But also I would argue, even if you weren't doing that, you could just do it from an ethical standpoint of the more that you protect and keep the funding away from these type of people, the better you're doing for your community and the rest of us here on planet Earth. So again, I mentioned all these businesses, they have startup costs. I would just argue that their startup costs are pretty inexpensive to get. I mean, you can buy these things. You can buy credit card numbers on the dark web from $2 to $90 each, depending on how well they're vetted. You can buy a fake ATM for a pretty low fee. So, I don't think that's probably not a question you ask David, say, hey, can I buy an ATM? But you can actually buy them, get fake ones, and start, basically printing your own money. An important notice here that is a common thing that we run into, that bank fraud, like a illegal wire from a hacker that maybe gets into your account, your bank doesn't have any responsibility to help you get that money back. That's not what FDIC does. That's not what it's for. And if it's a legitimate transaction, then, hopefully you have a really, really good relationship with your banker. If not, there's a couple here you could probably talk to that will do a great job for you and will probably work with you to help you in that situation. But I would say your best bet is to avoid it in the first place. So again, I'm not going to read you the slides here, but here's a good slide if you want to take out your phone and grab a snapshot or ask for the slide of what you can do to protect yourself and your business with some of those things. And a lot of these are, again, set up a policy on how you're going to do transfers if you do them at all, and probably rotate that policy if you have staffing changes or at a certain time frame that's appropriate for your business. Can save you a lot of heartache and a lot of money. So a lot of people ask, like, how do we, and before, if you guys were on early in the call, we were talking about some of the kind of funny ways people get information. But if you remember back a couple years ago, one of the largest firms of at least holding people's information, Equifax, was breached. And so the question you want to ask yourself is, that's frustrating, and we all saw the big news and we're like, what a terrible company to do that. But we also have to be realistic and say, where did all that information actually go? So I doubt everybody here, after they got that, changed their social security number. You probably didn't change your mother's maiden name. You probably didn't change any of that stuff that got leaked. So understand that this information is out there. And so you need to understand that, the lock has already been kind of opened, as it were. So now we have to really focus on what do we do about that. Again, I'm not going to read you all these, but Facebook's been breached multiple times. The other part of it would be, you might, as a business, block social media completely for people in your office, just as a time waster type of thing. Likely only your sales and marketing team really need to be on the social platforms. Everybody else is kind of stealing your money invisibly, right? It comes from a lot of things like malware. Again, these are statistics you might already be aware of, but some people are really staggered by the actual true number. This number, 82,000, is a per day number, not a per year. And then email protection, again, is critical. If you don't have a spam filter in front of your email, then you're wasting a lot of your own time having to go through it, and you're at much higher risk of attack. Also, we're now living in the world of, we're taking our computers with us everywhere we go. I bet all of you can either feel or touch, or within reach is your mobile computer, your smartphone, and the criminals know that. And so they're developing at a rapid pace different tricks and malware to get on your little mobile computer that we take around with us. And please know that those things are not immune to these attacks. So you've heard me talk for a long time here. I'm going to click it over. We're going to watch a quick little video that I think does a really good illustration. And I want you to kind of look out for a couple things. And if you want to post in chat, if you see some of the things and see whether these people are using sophistication or if they're just using processes to actually complete the hack here. So
hackers are everywhere. From Ashley Madison to JP Morgan, from Jennifer Lawrence to the federal government, our biggest celebrities, corporations, and institutions have all been the targets of devastating cyber attacks. I wanted to see how bad a hack can get, so I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas at DEF CON, the biggest hacker convention of the year, and see what they found. This might not have been the best idea.
This is the DEF CON ballroom. It's sort of the main room where things are happening, and it's pretty wild. I think this is car hacking village. This car is locked. Can you get me in?
I'll unlock it for you. Should be good.
Hacking is no longer like this fringe activity, and if you are at DEF CON, there's a good chance that you're here because you want to learn what could happen to you or your company.
Anyone here first time in the SCCTF?
I invited Chris to hack me with his team, but they're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection. Can we try some of this? Can we try some, see if it works?
Yeah, we probably could have our star visher here make some phone calls as
Let's do it.
Sure. Do you want to do a sample vishing call?
What's vishing?
Vishing is voice elicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it. Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider
Okay.
and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. my husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
gmail.com?
Jessica gets my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Shh. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account. Okay, my
Jessica uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry. So there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
They just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yes.
I really thought that my cell phone company would protect me. I mean, like, this is the most basic stuff, and they're not doing it. And if they're not doing it, you know all these other businesses aren't doing it either.
Anyone with a phone and an internet connection can do social engineering. But I was curious, what can a hacker with serious coding skills do? I asked Dan Tentler, a well-known security researcher, to turn all of his firepower on me.
I did get into quite a number of things that I found.
So what were the first things you did? How did you start hacking me?
I quickly found your Squarespace blog and had an idea. Basically what I did was created a bogus Squarespace site and sent an email to you, a fish asking you to go to this website, run this certificate installer.
And I did it, because I'm an idiot.
So once you ran that, it gave me access to your computer, and I created several fake pop-ups that looked like system pop-ups that would ask you for your credentials.
You didn't even have to have my passwords.
No, you gave them to me.
I gave them to you.
Yeah. So I stole your 1Password keychain.
And 1Password is where I store all my other passwords. So effectively by...
And your social security number and your Amex stuff and all your stock trading and bank information. I can send email to everyone in this room as you. I am you right now, if I wanted to be. If my evilness is working correctly, it should actually be taking pictures of your desktop and pictures through your webcam every 2 minutes. And I have been watching you for about 2 days now. In coffee shops, at your mom's house, on a plane. Here's your editing stuff. There's you like.
Oh my God! So this is literally
every 2 minutes
through my webcam.
Yeah, through this guy.
How badly could you have messed up my life?
I could have made you homeless. I could have made you homeless and penniless.
How? How would you make me homeless?
Like I have control of your digital life in its entirety. I have all your credentials. I have all your access to all your financial information, all your work information, all your personal information. I can pay people with your bank account or your Amex account. I am you. I can fully impersonate. Like, the only thing I couldn't doctor would be like your fingerprints.
This is like as bad as it gets.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's bad.
That was everything. That was the keys to my entire life, and he just pulled them out of his pocket.
The one thing that I wanted to point out there is actually, even though he was like, never trust a guy with an antenna in his backpack, number one, but number two, really most of those tools are not something they had to develop on their own, right? This is a process, and you can buy those different systems. And so I like numbers. I'm a numbers guy. $201. What am I talking about here? That's actually the average kind of loss per data point breached in a company. So you might say, well, that's not a big deal. Probably your company can cover $201. What I would caution you is like really there's a iceberg of hidden other costs if you have to deal with a breach or a situation. So again, not going to read you all the bullet points here, but just think of how much stress you'd have in your day if what happened to either one of those situations happened to you or somebody at your business, how much it's going to derail your plans for that day, that week, that month, that quarter, maybe even the rest of your year. So just because you might be part of a small or medium business doesn't mean that the value of those records is any less to the bad folks that are grabbing this stuff. So again, one of the conceptions I want everybody to at least leave this meeting with their, knowledge of is that most of the attacks are actually targeted at small and medium businesses. Because if you think about it, if you are trying to get, the results, would you go after a really large company like an Equifax, like a Target, these things that have been breached, right? And if you win, I mean, that might be a huge payday for you, but chances are you're going to run into a lot of obstacles trying to come after the big enterprise. But small and medium businesses might not be doing all the things, might not be funding all the things they need to do for their protection, might be just saying, it's not going to happen to us. So really become the low-hanging fruit. So I'm going to help you guys through that. And the other big thing that I want everybody to know, this is one that happens, is, you probably, if it hasn't happened to you, you probably know a friend or a business associate of, what's the most profitable letter to write? A ransom note. Ransomware is a real thing. It's a really, really terrible situation when it happens. Your best option is understanding it, that it exists, and how do you make sure that you've got your stuff backed up? How do you make sure that you've got systems in place to try to prevent it so that you don't have to, try to fix the problem after it happens? Go ahead, Tim.
Caleb, if you don't mind, I'll interject a story.
Yeah.
In the last 6 months or so, one of our customers was subject to ransomware, and they contacted us really quickly, and we were able to act on their behalf and, if you will, freeze the account, open up a new account, and move the money over so that their losses were held at a minimum. So this does happen, and it's really one of the reasons that prompted us to host this presentation, because of this ransomware attack on one of our customers. So thank you for bringing this up, Caleb.
Yeah, David, thanks for sharing that story, and I'm glad that it had a relatively happy ending. Again, it's one of those things I would still, if I was in that shoes, in that situation, I bet that whatever they'd planned for that day or that week or that month probably got greatly derailed. And what was the cost of the company just to have to even go down those paths? It sounds like, again, was mitigated for the most part, but having a plan in place is going to be critical so that you can think calmly and get those things done. So a lot of people, it's been more and more in the news, understand what the dark web is. It's basically, the simple way to explain it is, it's everything that's not something you type in your browser. So it's actually way, way bigger than the rest of, than the internet. And it's where these bad guys can buy and sell and trade. It's like a black market, as it were, on where these things go. So how they get there. So you might want to know about whether your company's credentials are even for sale on there, again, to know if you need to change those passwords you might not have changed for years and years. So all that was designed to illustrate that, we need to get serious about it. It's not something, and I think that you guys are here probably because you're interested in that. And so what does that actually look like? What are some of the things you can go back and take from this and do? And so I would argue that your most important piece here is, what are your mitigation actions look like? What do your plans look like for, if you took anything away from all those different slides, is the chances of you fully preventing this from happening is very, very low. It's not an if, it's just a when. So your best result is going to be, what is your plan for when this happens, so that you can mitigate your risk? Again, David's story was great about that, right? They got it right away, and so they were able to mitigate their problems that they had. So same kind of thing, if you want to use the analogy of how to use the security in your house, of course, you have locks on your doors and your windows and things like that, right? You have, in this picture of fences, you might have a security system, and those are good things to let you know. But probably the most, and that's kind of, I think, probably most everybody I interact with, they have those protection things in place. If you don't get those done, they're usually pretty inexpensive and ready to go. But what a lot of people haven't moved towards is the actual detection phase. Like, what do they have? What is their response for when they do have it? And so from a cybersecurity standpoint of, do you have alerting on if your credentials are for sale on the dark web? Do you have a mitigation plan if somebody in your office did download a file and now you have ransomware on your network? What does that look like? How soon do you know? So that's kind of what this slide is talking about. From this disaster on when it strikes, how long from the action to when your systems were ready to recover, and then how much downtime do you have? And just, there's no right or wrong answer, but having a plan for what that time frame looks like so you can build your response is really, really critical to knowing what it's going to look like when you have a problem. So you also, I would highly recommend, if you haven't engaged with whoever your insurance agent is, or your broker, your service, double check. A lot of people have a cyber policy or have an E&O, BOP or business owners policy that they've got. But if you haven't reviewed it, I would say probably within the last 18 months, you probably aren't going to be compliant, and you might have a really bad day when you try to actually use it. So again, I'm not going to read you through this bullet points here, but you'll probably want to have that conversation. So, reach out to whoever you work with there. If you don't have anybody, I can refer you to some really great resources for that, so that if you have to, you've got some protection there. So now we're on to the kind of title slide here. And again, I promise you, I know I hate it when people read me bullet points or read me PowerPoint, so I won't do that to you. Again, you can have these slides, but the most important part is, do something, right? Now that you have information, do something or review what you already have. You might already have a lot of these policies and procedures in place, but you might not have taken the time, or your business might not have taken the time to have it as a regular review. So maybe if you're a business, if you're moving and growing really quickly, maybe you have it as a quarterly. Maybe if you're pretty solid in your systems, maybe it's an every 6 months. But I would say at minimum, probably an annual, reviewing these steps of what have you implemented, what's actually working, do you need to change for the different changes in your business and institute new policies, and then how do you go about verifying that? How do you prove that it's going to work when you have it? And then build that plan so that you can then have that to work on, because we know Rome was not built in a day, and I bet your policies are not going to be built in a day either, and you'll have time to work on them. So here are some of the questions that leaders need to ask of themselves or their companies. So you got to figure out what you're trying to protect. And again, I'm not going to read you all of these, but the big things are, how do we go about making sure that we're doing everything we can, we're being good stewards of our companies and the funds that we have and the staff that work for us. And if you're like most businesses, you probably have a list of your patients or customers, and their expectation is that you are doing your due diligence to make sure that you aren't part of the problem, that you are not playing fast and loose with their information. And so what do those plans look like? So again, feel free to grab your phone and take a snapshot of those. This is just a good list. If you went through and you answered all those questions, you'd be ahead of probably more than, I'm pulling a number out of my tail here, but probably 70% of businesses, if you just had a written down answer to all of these, you'd be in a really good position to make a good move forward. So to protect your organization, likely, again, if you ask them those questions, what you're really trying to do is kind of a threat assessment. Then you build the plan, and then you need an ongoing maintenance plan to get that kind of stuff done, right? And I wish that I could say from eating a salad that I have a healthy diet, or if I did, if I went and jogged 5 miles, that I'm in shape. Sadly, for my waistline and for the way the world works, I have to do that on a regular basis. It has to be an ongoing thing, where I really can't claim those things to be true. So there's no such thing as an easy button or a one and done, set it and forget it, to any kind of security. Because even if you could do that, I guarantee that your business is dynamic and it's going to change. Certainly the marketplace is dynamic and it's going to change. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing this at a pretty regular basis so that you can stay in front of it. So I'll lead you with a great quote from kind of a tech hero of mine, of that success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, and only the paranoid survive.
Caleb, I'll make one observation, and then I'll have a question. I know as a bank, if we get complaints, it's because we ask people to go through a number of steps, specifically on electronic banking, for their protection. Or if they're traveling and they're planning to use their debit card, we will make sure that I ask them to call us so we know which states they're going to. Otherwise, that debit card might be, it won't be accepted because we've got certain fraud controls in place. So we are trying not to be the bad guys, but we're trying to be the helpful protectors of your assets. So that's a kind of a comment and observation. And so my question for you is, how would a business go about finding a company that would provide that kind of spoofing, if you will, so they can check their systems?
Great question. So I would say you're certainly not being the bad guy. It's I will use a different analogy than I'd like to use. I think it's really pertinent for everybody right now, but I'll say it's inconvenient to put on your seatbelt when you get in your car compared to just getting in and going. But likely that small inconvenience for the safety of, your likelihood of dying in a car crash is greatly reduced by having your seatbelt on. So AKA your bank saying, hey, we're going to make you have some security steps before you can log in to transfer funds from your account, or when you're using your debit card. If you're out of the normal zone of behavior, that we're going to alert you or maybe change that or let us know. That's usually being a good guy, in that small inconvenience is likely going to solve a major disaster down the road. It's kind of, again, the mindset of, I wish security was like, you could hit the button and say I'm secure, but it's way more akin to being healthy or having a good diet. I don't get to eat a salad for lunch this afternoon and say, cool, I eat healthy. I have to actually do that over and over and over. So it's a bit of an inconvenience, but the consequences, the risk that you're mitigating is massive by doing it that way. So, and then to the second part of your question, as far as how would you do that, there's lots of awesome companies that would love to do what in the biz talk for that spoofing would be something called like an audit or an assessment or a penetration testing, if you want to do that. And so, again, full disclosure, we do that for a lot of folks. And so if somebody wants to get in touch with us, we can do that. I would typically recommend that you usually would want to talk to your internal team first and find out what they're doing and make sure they're, kind of on their A game, and you can get great results from that, right? It wouldn't be surprising if you're working with somebody for your security and you said, hey, we were thinking about having this third party do an assessment, and we want to schedule that in the next month. Just giving you a heads up. I could pretty much guarantee that your security is going to vastly improve between that time and when that assessment would happen, as human nature would have it. So that's really good. Looks like
we have a question from Nicole. I'm going to open her up so she can ask her question here.
So in the video, he talked about having it sounded like he used something like KeepPass, where you have one password that has access to all of your, and we're told all of your other accounts, right? So it's simple. You remember one password. That's supposed to be secure, and that's kind of what we've been led to use. Are there any good security vault passwords, that you can use, or is that not recommended? And then I also had a comment on what you just said about your security audit. Wouldn't it be better to have a penetration test done without telling your internal security team the first time, so you can see truly what's going on, so they are aware of their weaknesses kind of in a generic manner?
Great questions. So yes, absolutely. By all means, I dare anybody to follow the security policies of having unique passwords for all their accounts. On average, the American right now has over 78 different accounts out there in their digital life. And almost everybody, unfortunately, uses the same password with variation, or they use the same password, which is terrible. So using a password manager will absolutely help you with that. In that hack demo, the thing that was not happening was he wasn't using, like the guy mentioned, if you were using a fingerprint authentication, so your biometrics on your phone to unlock that account, or the MFA system to unlock that, it really reduces your risk of having your password tool get compromised.
Okay.
And so there are awesome tools out there. They mentioned OnePass in the video. That's actually a really good tool. There's nothing wrong with a tool. It's just the use of it, right? He got tricked into putting in his things, and you could tell that he probably wasn't using the fingerprint authentication because he was just able to get right into it. And then to your second question, you're not wrong. The problem is there's some legality issues with that. Since a bunch of people go into freak out mode, including our politicians, when some of these bad things happen. It's been about 2.5 years now. The city of Atlanta got ransomware, and the state of Georgia put in a bunch of legislation that has been kind of rapidly adopted across the country. So it's pretty much as a system, verboten to do penetration tests without letting the folks know. So you could do it. Again, I would say you're probably going to be one of those, you're better served as an organization to not try to do a gotcha for the team that's serving you. It's probably going to be a much more fruitful situation if you're working on it together, because no matter what, I guarantee, again, there's no perfect, there's always going to be gaps. It's just, do we know where those gaps are and what plans are we doing? So
you can also hit an issue where if your team is on top of things and they put in the notification that we're being hacked to Homeland Security and the FBI before raising it up the chain, you can end up in trouble there as well.
Yeah. So that's why most folks will not do a blind test. There's typically going to be, now you still might have a lot of blind happen for people underneath to test out those policies, but certainly going to be wanted, any stakeholders in the business are going to want to be aware of that, which hopefully your CIO or your IT director, whatever you might call them, is going to be kind of in on the simulation, as it were.
Okay.
Make sure you're not on vacation.
Well, I mean, yeah, it might be a good time, but let them know, hey, you're on vacation. Don't freak out. We're about to do a pen test on your network. They're going to freak out. That's what I was saying. If you want to light a fire under somebody, tell them the test is coming up. I think we've all experienced that through life, even if, high school, midterms or finals or college. You really get to that crunch time of like, if that test is coming up, you're going to work on the work, right? If it's just up in the air and it's just a thing, then unfortunately our human nature, falls back to the status quo.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, Caleb, I think Eric had a question and maybe Tim answered it in the chat, but if Eric wants to open up his mic and chat with us.
Oh, you did it now. If you give Eric a chance,
I know. I'm sorry about
he's
that.
almost as much of a prolific talker as I am.
This is not smart. Sorry, can you hear me? This is very unwise. But no, Caleb, just wanted to ask if you've got a recommended firewall. If somebody wanted to try to do that themselves, I don't know why, but recommended firewall with antivirus and then a malware piece of software, and then, or can you just handle it for us?
Great question. I mean, I just feel like it's a big softball coming at me here. Absolutely, we would handle that for you. And there are the nice thing is there's a lot of tools, and we have a great stack that has worked really well for our clients. And if somebody's trying to implement at home or at their office, please reach out to me. I would be happy to figure out what your situation is, and then help you determine what would be the right stack of tools. That would be, I guess, to overarching, I think your question does it really well. You have to have those things. You can't just have the firewall. You can't just have the antivirus. You can't just have a training system like KnowBe4. You have to have them all if you really want to. And the great news is, because there's such a plethora of tools out there, there's a lot of competition. And so the pricing for these is when we get down to it with a lot of people, it's actually probably less expensive than you think.
That's perfect. Well worded. And sorry, my follow-up question is, should we just all switch to Macs?
Well, if you notice in that video, they were both using Apple computers. So that's what I was saying. Behavior is more important than the tool. We're a vendor agnostic, so we have a mix, and our clients have a mix. They were historically known as a hey, if you want to be safe and secure, use an Apple product. But they're kind of doomed by their popularity, right? So the analogy I would use is, if you were going to make pants, and you wanted to sell a lot of pants, and you're going to sell them in the United States, you probably better sell some blue jeans, because we buy and sell a lot of blue jeans. So because Apple has been extremely popular and a ton of people have their devices, the bad guys know this, right? So they have their attacks specifically, for the behavior, so that it doesn't matter as much the device that you're using as much as it matters the behaviors in which you're using them. So yeah, I thought that was a little cute on that video. If nobody probably is a nerd like me and sees that their Apple laptops they're using, but that's what they're using. And then the other part I would say, never trust a guy who's got an antenna coming out of the back of his backpack. Just do that from that video, you'll be better.
The other thing is the bad guys out there use the myth that Macs are secure and you can't hack a Mac, and they don't have vulnerabilities. And Mac users tend to blow off education, and they blow off a lot of those things, and are becoming one of the more susceptible brands of people, right? And so be leery of that, of those myths of, well, I use this so I'm safe. Nobody's ever safe.
You just become safer.
We've got time for one or two more questions, but while people are thinking about that, let me ask you, we've talked about businesses and security, but and a lot of it is apropos for individuals, but is there anything that an individual should think about that maybe is an add-on or different from a business security perspective?
For sure, yeah. So for one of the videos that actually cut out of the thing is, the rise of smart devices, and the simple and convenient thing to do, I think we run into that word a lot, and it's more dangerous than we think, is to pop those puppies out of the box and throw them on your kitchen counter and say, cool, Echo, Alexa, tell me what recipes I want to make for dinner tonight. And they're just on your regular network, and you don't set up any of the security that is detailed in the boxes. So that would be the big thing, is the Internet of Things is the quote unquote technical term for it. Smart thermostats, smart appliances, all those different things. Smart cameras are really, were big in the news because, and actually the company that was making them got sued, and actually they settled out of court, but they won the lawsuit because the person didn't set up, they just had the default passwords on everything. So if you guys really wanted to be scared, on another demo, I could show you, there's a really cool tool out there where literally I could just query, hey, what are open webcams, or what are open remote desktop servers that are out there, even here in Columbia, and you can see literally people's desktop backgrounds, you can see their family, you can see their users that they've got logged in the computer. They just got them open. So more than ever, I'm working from home right now. So wouldn't it be important for my home network to be as good as my work network? And that's one of the tricky things that's happened in our industry, is like it used to be, if you lock down your switches and your firewalls and you quote unquote secured the perimeter, as it were, you were doing really well. You could check the box that you're doing what you need to do. With cloud computing and with people working from home and working remotely and working all over the place, there's really no more perimeter anymore. And that's what is a big gotcha for a lot of those, bigger breaches that we hear about in the news, is we're all connected. The big Target breach was their HVAC company. So their smart thermostats and things like that they had a breach. That's how they got into the system. So yeah, I would say a really awesome thing that people could, this really simple thing that people could do, is reach out to your IT company if you're working from home and just said, hey, can you check my home network? Can you check my home computer? I'm going to be accessing my stuff from that, and I want to make sure that I'm not putting, myself at risk or the business at risk. So that would be, and then I would say, again, it's kind of a Huxley world. Be smart about what you post. You don't have to share everything with the whole world about stuff, for the social engineering stuff. I know it's so cool and convenient to do. I promise you, those pictures of you and your family on vacation can wait until you're back home. Like you do not have to post them as you're there and let all the bad guys know, oh man, I know Dave lives in a really nice house and I see that he's in Florida. I'm gonna go pay him a visit. So you could just wait a week and look over the good memories with your family and choose what you want to post after the fact. We'll get just as much reaction as a live stream of where you're not, where people might think that you are, and may take advantage of that.
Brandon's asking, what are the most recommended technologies or apps to keep you protected? And then what to do about passwords, essentially. I think what he's really asking for is, what's the best password management tool?
On password manager tool, use one and have a really unique password that's not, associated with anything else. And if you have one, you've got to use one, because that guy in the video, right, he was using one, and a very good one. 1Password's a great password management tool, but he didn't have any kind of what's called multi-factor authentication, or you might hear it called two-factor authentication, which would have stopped that likely thwarted that process that happened to him on there. So use one, make sure it has what's called MFA, and there's great little apps on your phone to be able to get that. You might already be using one with your bank. I hope you are. If you're not, go ask them. Put it on your login to your bank. If you can do any kind of transactions, you have to have that on there, or you're just really asking for a lot of trouble. So use one. They're all great. Some are better than others, like everything else in life. But the important part is actually use it and make sure that when you log in, that it's not the same password you use for everything else, that it's a really unique password, and that it's going to do a verification that you are you, usually by, again, getting a code on your phone that, I think it's actually a psychological thing now of like if people lose their phones or set them place, they can actually like feel that's missing. So most people are kind of attached to their phone. So that's a really good way, unlock it with your fingerprint and then unlock get into the application. So, and then for the other part of the question, there's a lot of different places you can get a lot of different information, and sorting out what's real and what's not is tough. I would recommend, if any of you guys are leaders at your business or have employees, that you have some type of system in place to educate your staff, some type of super low cost to implement. We're even giving away one for free. It's an annual thing. So, hint there, if you want that, we can provide you with that. But have a tool that you're offering, that you're making as a mandatory thing to protect. Again, it will really help you protect your business, but it will also help that person individually, right? If you are safer with your work information and your work data and how you're doing that, you're likely going to be safer at home. And, people are people, right? If somebody loses their entire savings from getting hacked in their personal life, they're probably not going to be a great employee during that week or that time, because they're going to be really freaked out about what just happened to them. So again, there's some things we can do that we can do as business owners and leaders that will have, kind of ripple good effects. So having cybersecurity training is really critical. You guys are on this call, so that's a good way. There's a lot of good resources.
And Caleb, you brought up a good point, and Brandon brought it up earlier of, on that video, how freaky it was and acting at its finest. But having your policies and enforcing your policies can be one of the biggest things you can do. Most of these breaches happen through the social connection now. And so really enforcing your policies and having those policies in place can be one of the biggest things you can do, because the human element is to help somebody in need. And that's going to be the thing that can get you in trouble. So like David was talking about, the bank makes you jump through a bunch of hoops, but it's for your protection. So
it's not always true, but most of the time, convenience is the enemy of security. So it'd be much easier if we all just had a big pile of money on our kitchen table that we walk past every day, and we could go do our stuff. But I don't think any of you are doing that. You probably do have it in a bank. You probably do have some things in place that help you keep other people's hands out of it and keep your own hands out of it sometimes, right? So we're talking about the same thing here with hopefully my presentation was able to show that these data points are money. So they have their own intrinsic value. So we have to kind of think about that they're really a currency, right? So we just take the little slips of paper and the digital numbers in our accounts as a placeholder for value. The criminals that are trying to get this are not always trying to get into your bank account, as we saw with the social media hack, or the social hack where she called in. That's a leverage, that's a power that can get you the information you would need to launch a successful attack to get, up the stream, as it were.
Okay, Caleb, I'm aware, in certainly retail businesses and banking, there's the concept of secret shoppers. They come in and check your customer service and whatnot. I'm assuming there's a similar service for small businesses if they want to check their IT system and make sure that their staff are really paying attention to the protocols. So can you comment on that?
Yes. So what most happens, and what's probably the best way to go about this, because there has been some interesting legislation from some different things happening there, because how do you tell I'll use a nerd word here, what we were seeing in that video, those are called white hat hackers, meaning they're the good guys that are kind of to catch a thief, right? You got to know how they're doing these attacks to be able to prevent them and educate people. And so there are lots of agencies that do that. And but that's again when you kind of go up the chain of like a lot of times their clients are enterprise. You know, the enterprise will hire them because they do typically, you know, have a pretty high cost at that. So what I would say for most of us likely on this call and most businesses across the US and Western civilization, likely do these audit. You'd be surprised how much you could do with just those simple questions with whoever your internal IT resource is, and do those audits yourself. And once you've got those where you feel like they're really awesome, if you feel like you need it, then bring somebody, you know, a hired gun to come in and do those checks. But likely you'll get the very best lift in your security if you just let people know, hey, Tim, we're going to be doing an audit of our security policies here in the next month. And so you'll want to, you know, check your password tool and make sure you don't have any of the ones that are duplicates or not unique. And so we let Tim know that. And so Tim says, oh man, I should run that report. Oh yeah, look at these 16 passwords that I have that are all the same. I'm going to be proactive because I don't want my name on the naughty list when this audit comes through, and fix those so that my report card looks good. It's amazing the amount of lift that can happen with just doing that internally. So I may have dodged your question a little bit. There absolutely are people that will do what's called a penetration test. But I would argue for most businesses, even enterprise, it's kind of that being an answer is kind of that set it. It feels like to a lot of people it's that set it and forget it standpoint. Like the audit is really important, but it's really the work, the ongoing work, the ongoing maintenance. They'll typically come in and show you all your problems and then walk away, and then you've got to do all the things anyway. So knowing that is certainly really, really important, but likely the real effect comes from working the policies, making sure they're up to date, so that they're not talking about stuff like, you know, what to do when your, you know, typewriter runs out of ink, making sure that they're modern, you've reviewed them with your staff, those kind of things. So
Anna, any other questions out there in the queue that you see, or has everybody received? Yeah. Is there a example that you worked with, Tim or Caleb, with a company that other than the video that you played, is a real life example that might be relevant to our group today?
So real world, one of the big things is if they can get into your email system, and to be perfectly clear here, when these bad guys get in, they lurk for a long time. And at the end of the game, they'll use the malware to destroy your system to cover their tracks. But if they can get into your email system and they can kind of watch and see, oh, this is the person you send POs to get checks made out. And they do wire transfers, and this is the form they use. And so now I'm going to use that, and I'm going to have it sent to my account, and it looks internal, right? So it looks like Caleb's asking me to send a check over to this vendor, and I got a PO, I got a receipt, everything looks legit. And at the end of the day, we send that wire transfer off, and as David said, now that money's gone, right? You're out of it. So having those double checks, the little things you can do of calling the person who's getting the check to confirm that they're the right person, talking within your organization. Hey, Caleb, did you really just send me this PO? Because I've never heard of this company. I didn't know we did business with them. Just those little things will help you tremendously as a policy. But again, it's policies that you have to create and you have to enforce.
Anna, would you pop up our screen with all of our contact information in case people want to reach out to us? Let me say again, thank you for participating, for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. And a special thanks to Caleb and Tim and Bruce for your efforts to educate us and make us more aware of the hazards out there. And one last thank you to Vantage Consultants for their participation. So with that, Anna, if there's not any more questions, we'll adjourn this version of Hawthorn College, and We'll let you know when our next session is available. And if you have suggestions about topics and presenters, let us know that as well. Thanks again, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.